Ko te tūrama kei runga te tūrama e rangi te tūrama mō tangaroa mō rangi nui e tū nei. Te pūpuke tangaroa te māhara, tangaroa te hiringa, te atamai te hiringa o ngā kau o tāngata. Ka wete wete a ka taratara ki te ata ura, ki te ata hana, ki te ata kōrero, ki te ata wānanga. Te huhuki kei runga, te huhuki e rangi, te huhuki runga tangata matua. He waka tau eke, he waka tau iho, ko tū korongo ki te whai au ki te ao marama. E rongo waka irihi aki ki runga ki a tina, haumi e hui e tā. Tuatahi ake, ka tuku natu ngā mihi kia ngai rātou kua wheturangi tia ki te pō. Haere, haere, o ki atu rā, ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki te pāmama. Hoki wairua mai kia ngai tātou kua kao mai i tēnei rā, marunga i te karanga o te kaupapa nei, nei rā ka tuku natu ngā mihi atu ki a tātou katoa. Ngā rauranga tira mā, ngā koro matua, ngā kui matua, ngā rangatira o ngā iwi, o ngā hapu, o ngā hāpori, o Aotearoa nei, ka tuku natu ngā mihi atu ki a koutou. Nau mai, hara mai, eke mai nei rā, ki tēnei wāhi o tātou, o te atiawa, o Taranaki whānui, a ki runga nei o tō tātou nei papa whenua o te aro, ki te taha nei o tō tātou nei moana rā te whanganui ātara, a mararo anō i ngā marumaru o ngā paimaunga e tū mai nei, ka tuku mihi atu ki a koutou. Nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai nei rā, ki runga i a tātou i tēnei rā. Kia ora. Kia ora everyone, and welcome. Acknowledgements from mana whenua to you all at this place today. Acknowledgements to our mayors, our leaders, and all distinguished guests who have joined us today for this occasion. I must say it's quite an honour for me because I actually spoke in the opening of the launch of this event, of this report, of this review, and it's good to be here again to close it off. And I know that there are going to be a number of great things spoken about today, and so I'm not going to hold that up. So with that, just welcome once, twice, and thrice, and I'll pass it over. Kia ora.
Kia ora, welcome this morning. It's great to see so many familiar faces. My name's Martin Pinkard. I'm the Executive Director of the Secretariat that's been supporting the panel in its work, and I'm going to be the MC this morning. So I'm just going to briefly tell you how the running order will work, and then the housekeeping, and then we'll get into the main event. So we're going to have speeches from Jim Palmer, from Stuart Crosby, and then from Monique Davison, who tells me she's been working on her stand-up act. So I'm looking forward to that. We're then going to have a Q&A session for 20 minutes, where I encourage you to have an interaction with the panel, and then we will have a closing, a karakia, and then you're welcome to stay for food after that and to continue the conversations. We hope to get that all done by 12:45, and then we'll have the food at 12:45. So that's my ambition, is to try and keep it on time to budget. Now, housekeeping. It says here you're in safe hands. So the restrooms, you go all the way down the stairs to the basement. If you want the restrooms, there is one, I believe, located on this floor just along the corridor there. In the event of some kind of emergency, obviously the exits are marked. Follow the staff to the mustering point, which is in the large square just over here, the Odderland Square. And then, in the event of an earthquake, drop and hold, wait for staff to tell you what to do, and take under further advisement. In a tsunami, it says head up Taranaki Street, brackets, quickly. Close brackets and keep going. We could have worked on that wording. And then in the event of a fire, obviously, evacuate the building to the mustering point again, which is over in there. Okay, so there is somebody here taking photos. That's for ourselves, really. So we're just for a record of today's event. So that's just to let you know that that's going to be going on. But without further ado, let's get into the main event. Welcome to speak Jim Palmer, who's been the chair of the Future for Local Government panel. Jim, would you care to come up and tell us all about the report?
Kia ora. Thanks, Martin. Kia ora mai tātou, ngā mihi nui. e te rangatira mā te mihi karakia hoki, e te iwi o Taranaki Whanui, tēnā koutou, te whare waka e tū ro rangatira mā, hui hui mai nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'd like to thank you for being here today at the official launch of the panel's final report into the review for the future of local government. I'd especially like to acknowledge Kara Pukitapu Dentis, Upuku of Taranaki Whanui, and thank you for karakia, mihi, and very warm welcome. And it's great to see you here to be able to close off the event, start and finish. So that is greatly appreciated. Thank you, Kara. Struggled to find you in the audience. I finally found you. So there's a really handily placed whopping grate, and perhaps for the earthquake, it's fantastic that it sits there and gives us great comfort. But it certainly makes a better door than a window. Look, there are a number of people I'd like to acknowledge, and in a room like this where we're filled with many friends and colleagues, there's a risk of exclusion, but there are some people I'd specifically like to acknowledge and thank for being here. Firstly, President of Local Government New Zealand, Stuart Crosby. Thank you, Stuart, very much for your support, and also the support from Susan Freeman-Green, who can't be with us today, and also from all of the Local Government New Zealand team. Throughout the review, they've been staunch in their support, and it's made a big difference for the panel, and that is greatly appreciated and acknowledged. Also, similarly like to acknowledge Monique Davidson here today on behalf of Taitoa. Really, again, the encouragement that you have provided us through the review when we've got to some difficult times, that's given us the momentum to carry on and provide a report which we think is right. So thank you again. I'm delighted that Sir Geoffrey Palmer can be with us today. Thank you for your sage advice as we grappled with some challenging issues. And again, your insights have given us confidence to say what we have. So thank you very much. In a similar vein, I'd like to acknowledge John Ombler, who was an original member of the panel. John, thank you. You set us on a pretty sound path and gave us, again, some great advice that we've followed through. I'd also like to thank Paul James and I think Michael Lovett, who I don't think has quite got here yet. Select committee might be holding him up, but thank you again for your support throughout the review. There are some other people that weren't on my list, but I think I just need to acknowledge also. There are some people from our Secretariat, and we've been blessed with the Secretariat team, and in particular, there are some people who have joined us today who were part of the original setup, Brian Patchett and Sarah Palashik. Want to say a big thank you to both of you for both being here today and the way in which you helped us shape this review. It's been influential. Similarly to Janine Dowding, who's come in and played a massive role over the last year, and I'd just like to acknowledge and thank you very much. There are some people who have travelled far to be with us today, and there are three in particular that I'd just like to acknowledge. Elizabetha Heta and Glenn Wilcox, who have both walked alongside our review panel as part of our Māori Thought Leadership team and have provided us wonderful advice. So to come down from Tamaki Makaurau today to be with us is hugely appreciated. And in a similar vein, I'd also like to acknowledge Sam Napier from Ngāpui, who has come all the way today also to support the review. You were a tremendous advisor, supporter and sharer of wisdom with the panel, and we greatly acknowledge the contribution that you've made. So thank you again for being with us today. Finally, in terms of thanks to my friends and fellow panel members, Penny, Antoine, Gail and Brendan, and of course again acknowledge the hard work of our Secretariat. It's been an absolute privilege to work with you all. An awesome, talented group of people. Thank you. Today marks another milestone for our review into the future for local government. It is not the final chapter of our review, and people need to pick up the ball and run with it to continue to lead the change that is needed. Our mahi started over 2 years ago. The independent review, and I think all ministers of local government would like me to reinforce those words, the independent review was sought by the local government sector to provide clarity about its future in light of significant other reforms that had already been signalled. They asked the then Minister of Local Government, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, to launch a ministerial review into the future for local government. With an agreed terms of reference, the panel set about its work. We've been delighted with the support we've received from both local government throughout the country and particularly Hapu, Iwi and Māori. I'd like to thank the then Minister and the current Minister of Local Government, Karen McAnulty, for enabling the panel to do its work. They stressed the importance of undertaking an independent review, and I can honestly say that not once did they try and influence the panel's thinking. Today, the panel is very pleased to be able to present our final report, He Piki Tūranga, He Piki Kotoku. He Piki Tūranga, He Piki Kotoku, with its reference to the kotoku, the white heron, literally translates into a beautiful thing to behold, perhaps an unexpected surprise. It's supported by an 800+ page technical report and a submissions analysis report. As a panel, we are passionate supporters and advocates for local government and believe strong local government is critical to building community resilience, intergenerational well-being and strong local democracies. The issues New Zealand face currently and those coming at us are likely to persist and intensify, whether it's climate change, natural disasters, social and economic inequities, or geopolitical disruption. It seems that living with polycrisis is becoming the norm. These issues, while they play out globally and nationally, they also play out at place, locally. We feel the current local government system is not set up for success. We do not see the mature relationships, mechanisms, and systems to deal with these future challenges. Despite much great work undertaken by councils across the motto, and we saw huge and many examples of that in our work, due to day-to-day pressures and a lack of funding, there's been a depletion in the bandwidth to be able to think and operate strategically, and to adapt and create sustainable change. In saying this, we're not laying the fault at council's door. Rather, it's a whole of system issue, and the position we find ourselves in today has evolved over the last couple of decades. In reality, there hasn't been a comprehensive review of the local government system in my 4 decades of working in or alongside the sector. The reforms of the late 80s and the review of the Local Government Act were not reviews of the entire system. Our review, in my view, is unique in that sense. To meet the future challenges we face, we do not believe the current local government system is fit for the future. Change and reset is required. The recommendations in our report are interdependent, and we do not think that partial or ad hoc implementation will create the sustainable change needed. As a panel, we took heart from the strong message we heard from the sector, and that was to be bold. Some of our recommendations have significant implications. If implemented fully, we believe Aotearoa New Zealand will have a world-leading system of local government. We know some recommendations will be challenging for both local government and central government, but we think they are necessary. It is critical that local government must lead the change. The then Prime Minister was clear at last year's LGNZ conference that central government is not going to lean in unless local government shows leadership first. However, as change will inevitably take some years, we also think it is essential that there is bipartisan support across the Parliament. Further, we see the opportunity to align our recommendations with other reform timetables, especially the proposed RMA reforms. To assist in thinking about how to give effect to this, we have provided a roadmap of how the reform program should play out following our review. As I said, we've only made 17 recommendations. While we think all are important, there are a few that I'd like to touch on that we think are critical to implementation. First, a key recommendation is that the purpose of local government is double entrenched in legislation, in the Local Government Act. It will give certainty and clarity about local government's mandate that has been lacking for the last decade. It will require a supermajority of Parliament to achieve this. While we acknowledge the importance of preserving the sovereignty of Parliament and that such measures should be used sparingly, we think it is one of the rare merited exceptions. Ideally, such matters should be considered in the context of constitutional debate, but currently there seems no or little appetite for that to occur. We see our proposal as an interim solution in that regard. We're also recommending that statutory provisions are added that reinforce and give effect to the wellbeing purpose. It will require councils to set wellbeing goals and priorities each term, supported by a commitment from central government and local government to align wellbeing priorities and agree place-based investment plans. These could take many forms and include such things as place-based and city deals. If change is to be sustained, we believe there needs to be a significant culture and mindset change both within local government and central government. We are recommending a new Crown Department be established to facilitate the relationship with local government and to coordinate and align resources to assist in resetting the central government-local government relationship. We are being explicit in our view that local government is a te tiriti partner, and that should be recognised in the Local Government Act. Local government must embody a more culturally specific exercise of kāwanatanga, where te ao Māori, Maturanga Māori and tikanga are woven into its fabric. This will not only require new partnership frameworks, but increased investment in the capacity and capability of local government, as well as support for hapu iwi Māori. For local government to be more sustainable and meet the expectations that have been placed on it, we are recommending a significant shift in central government funding to local government. Not only does this mean better directed funding to support locally specific wellbeing outcomes, we are recommending an annual transfer of revenue to local government, initially a sum of $1 billion a year. Just to be clear, I've seen some commentary since, it is not a return of GST. It is different to that, but it is a transfer of $1 billion. As others have been saying for decades, we are recommending central government pay rates on all its properties as well. We know that these recommendations, given the current fiscal constraints, are challenging, but we would emphasise to central government that it will be investing in a new system of local government, not the current system. We also add our voice to those of others recommending the establishment of a significant intergenerational fund to support climate change adaptation activities. There does need to be system change and renewal both for central government and local government. In addition to the new Crown Department, we are recommending a reorganisation of local government and a new stewardship institution that provides care and oversight for the health and fitness of the local government system. And among other things, that would include the health of local democracies, the capacity and capability of local government, as well as the strength of the local government Māori relationship. We propose that it would also incorporate the roles currently undertaken by the Local Government Commission. In respect of reorganisation of local government, we believe there needs to be a new operating model and new structure. We propose 2 structural options be considered, a unitary model and one we're calling a combined network model. Importantly, we are suggesting that local government, in the first instance, should lead the process to decide what is best for it. We suggest that the proposed 15 RMA regional boundaries would be a starting point for discussions, with councils within each region engaging with their communities and hapu iwi to work out what is most appropriate for their region. That could well include regional and sub-regional solutions. In the event councils within a region can't find a solution, then decisions would need to be made on their behalf. Interestingly, as we've completed our review, aligned recommendations to ours have emerged in recent reviews. In particular, the Productivity Commission's report, A Fair Chance for All, that was released yesterday, as well as the Ministry of Justice independent review of electoral reform. We've heard those reviews saying similar things to us, and that's given us confidence that we're on the right track. In conclusion, we think the recommendations contained within our report are significant, and if implemented, will create a system of local government that is fit for the future and world-leading. We cannot stress strongly enough the need for local government to lean into the work required to put our recommendations into action and be the strong advocates for change and reset that is required. We also need to see central government equally prepared to change and partner with a strengthened local government. Again, on behalf of the panel, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to you all for both being here today as well as the great contribution you've made to our review. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to invite Stuart Crosby from Local Government New Zealand to come up and to give us a short speech about the future for local government based on what he's heard this morning. And then we'll have one more speech and then we'll be into questions and answers. So maybe think about your Q&A, write down some tricky ones, and we'll get the panel on stage and we'll see how they do with that.
Tēnā koutou nā rangatira, ka hanui te mihi, kia koutou katoa. Nearly good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see a number of good friends here for this launch for the future for local government. As Jim said, the origin for this work actually started in one little slide that the former Minister for Local Government put up in a Three Waters conversation. And I remember it distinctly. It was in Christchurch. And one sentence that had filling the gap. And my ears sort of pricked up and said, what does that mean? And obviously it was in relation to if the water service entities were stood up, and it's going through its process at the moment, there would be some more capability and capacity for local government to become more involved in the four well-beings. So after some discussion, as Jim highlighted, we said, well, how? What are you actually going to do about it? And there was a real risk then of having an inquiry for local government. And I give credit to the former minister in terms of the direction of travel that it took now to have this panel and their conversations around the future for local government. There's a big difference. So there was quite a little bit of background for that. I do want to recognise, Jim, you and your panel, all of them, for your work and your commitment in engaging with local government. It would have been really easy to grab the terms of reference go away in a back room and come out with something and say, what do you think? That did not happen. There was an enormous amount of ongoing engagement and what I describe as quite an iterative process. So thank you for that. I'm sure your air points clocked up a fair bit over the last 2 years, but you know, Jim and the panel were at many zone and sector meetings, conferences, etc. And of course, you know, we also saw the iterative draft, sort of, I think it was September last year-ish, as well. And then, you know, to us, that was evidence that, hey, what do you think? You know, are we heading in the right direction here? And then it was, there's a lot of feedback on that draft, I might add. Most of it was around, very good, but tighten it up, be more specific, give us something tangible. And to that end, to the panel, you have succeeded, and we thank you for that. And it was really good to see LGNZ's input reflected in that report. And when I talk about LGNZ, it's not just, you know, the entity, it's actually all the membership as well. They grasped the opportunity and really did get engaged, as did other members of the public and iwi, and that's really important. And I think it's come through in the result. So we did consult quite extensively. As I said, there was a lot of engagement. And we are pleased to see some 19 of our recommendations included in some shape or form, and at least 10 out of the 17 core recommendations have found their way into the final report. The panel have made it clear that there is a real need to transfer resources and level up funding between central and local government. It must come with a commitment also to do things differently, and this includes changing the system to be more responsive to local needs. We firmly believe local government is best placed to take a leadership role on big issues like responding to climate change, dealing with regional inequities, building social cohesion, and planning for growth. But this must go hand in hand with a real partnership with central government, including a new approach in sharing revenues and costs. Without a new approach to funding, local government cannot deliver to communities, and we can't overemphasise that enough. The report makes critical recommendations around funding, to which LGNZ strongly supports. Central government should invest more in local government. The government should invest significantly in an amount that's roughly equivalent, we were told, Jim, to the sort of GST on rates. Not supposed to mention that, but that was sort of the rough rule of thumb that we were told, which is approximately $1 billion. And it should pay rates on Crown land, which has been a bugbear for us for quite some time, and actually been an issue on many reports in terms of funding for local government. And the interesting thing there, for some of us have been around a little while, pre-1989, you know, the government of the days did actually have quite a lot of financial assistance rates over and above just transport, which we're familiar to now. It was actually in the Three Waters, pre-89. It was also quite significant in catchment schemes, up to 70% financial assistance rates, and that was kind of the trade-off in the day as to why the governments didn't pay full rates, because they were actually contributing significantly. And of course all that changed in 1989. We've been advocating for a system change, and we're glad to see the panel takes aim at this. System change needs to support and enable councils to make decisions at place. That includes changing the local-central government relationship. We've been really clear that we want to see better stewardship of local government. The report proposes an independent agency, appropriately supported, for this to be successful. This will be critical in terms of the long-term success of local government and any other change. In short, I'd see it as an agency that creates that linkages between central and local government, not just as we go through change, but also to protect it as we move forward. We note the recommendation that the local government is being explicitly positioned as a treaty partner. That's a big step. That's a big step. Our view has been traditionally that the Crown and iwi have the partnership. But in saying that, the current ad hoc approach via various pieces of legislation is confusing to the community, iwi and councils. Very rarely is time given to communicate, engage, to get a collective understanding of how the treaty should be reflected in local government. And there specifically I'm talking about our community. It seems to be an issue with this country. We do not take time to spend engagement with the broader community so they can get an understanding in terms of the opportunity as well. It's a challenging conversation, but it's one that needs to be had. At the moment, we are operating in a range of probably 78 ad hoc arrangements in terms of our relationship with iwi. Many of the recommendations made by the panel in the mix are ones that we've been talking about for a very long time. And I'd have to say not every single council will agree with all the recommendations, but local government understands the need for change. And as I said at an interview earlier this morning, the current system is not sustainable moving forward in terms of the challenges that are before us. But let's be realistic. The structural conversation is going to be a difficult one. I've still got some scars from 1989, and I do remember those days very clearly. But as Jim said, you know, that was kind of a different situation, and it was, in a way, the wrong focus. It was just about, you know, going from 600 something or other authorities to a lot less. But in there was also a lot of other change about how we actually operated. These individuals called CEOs popped up. There was a clear separation in the day between governance and management. So it was quite comprehensive, but again, actually not that well understood. So as we go through this process, we do need to take our time to make sure there's collective understanding of all the issues. But one thing that I can say on behalf of LGNZ and our membership, that we need to lead that change ourselves in the first instance, and we need to lead those conversations around any structural change. It will be challenging for some. We're really pleased to see the strong emphasis on localism. The report recognises the need for decisions to be made at the right place and communities to be part of that decision making that actually affects them. It's something we've been talking about for a long time. And this is critical for the future health of local democracy in Aotearoa, New Zealand as a whole. There has been this theme for some time about either regionalisation or centralisation, and I think the evidence is there that by default or by design it has happened. Now's the time to turn that round. We urge central government politicians not to take the easy road and play politics with this report. Local government matters too much to our communities. Together with councils, LGNZ will advocate for the government to stop talking about change and take some action. And the panel have created a good pathway for that to happen. LGNZ calls on all political parties to make their position on these recommendations clear, and we're happy to spend time with them so they understand the nuances of local government. While we have great relationships with the various MPs, either in or out of the government, we do also understand that while they have the power to make changes to us and communities, they're often not that well versed on the nuances of local government. And so we would like to spend some time with them all to make sure that they understand the opportunities that this report has placed in front of New Zealand as a whole. This report does require serious consideration. It's too important to be lost in the pre-election noise or put in the drawer. If no action is taken, there will be real consequences for our communities as we move forward, and that will be in the negative. As I stand here today and reflect back to 2 years ago at the launch event of this whole endeavour in April 2021, the speeches made then, local government instigated this process, as I say, and now we have some bold recommendations to consider. Not every council will agree with all the recommendations, but local government is united for the need for change. And through our own networks, through zone and sectors and conferences, we constantly poll our members informally and there has been some consistent themes coming through. It's always funding is probably the biggest one, is wanting to have a genuine workable relationship with the government of the day, and then it manifests it down to a whole lot of matters that are actually in the report. So what I can say with a high degree of confidence is while we may not agree initially of all the recommendations, there is a general theme that local government as we know it today is not sustainable and there does need to be change. The current Minister of Local Government has been very clear that change will only be driven initially if it's supported by local government, and that's good and that's healthy. But we'd also need the support of the government of the day to help progress those conversations, and there's room in the report for that to happen. This report presents a one-in-a-generation opportunity to reinvigorate local government, galvanise communities and strengthen democracy. So let's seize it together. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I'd now invite Monique Davison to come up and speak on behalf of Taitoora. Thank you.
Ina mana, ina reo, ina karanga maha. Ko tēnei taku mihi ki ana mana whenua o te rohi nei. Ka mihi hoki au ki ngā tohu o te rohi nei. Tai noa ki te whānau, kaunihira kātou o te motu. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Ko tararua te maunga te runei taku nā kau. Ko oho te awa, he mahia nei aku māharahara. No hora whenua ahau. He mihi ana kia ngā tohu, o nehe, o hora whanua e noho au. Ko Monique Davidson tuku ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I'd like to acknowledge mana whenua, Jim and his fellow panel members, to Stuart and Local Government New Zealand, leaders in local and central government, and to distinguished guests. I'm Monique Davidson, not the stand-up comedian that you've been promised, Chief Executive of Horowhenua District Council, and here today as Vice President-elect of the Taitoora Board, representing the thousands of professionals who, like me, work in local government because we believe in the power of communities, the power of place-based leadership, community-led decision-making, and partnerships at place. First, though, I'd like to extend a sincere apologies from our current President, Sanchia Jacobs. Sanchia is unable to be with us here today due to her current work commitments with the Hawke's Bay Recovery Authority, a project that is incredibly important to not just the communities of Hawke's Bay, but New Zealand. I also know that Joe Miller, President-elect for the Taitoora Board, is absolutely gutted she can't be with us also. At the launch of the review in April 2021, Jo spoke on behalf of Taitoora. She painted a picture of era-scale change on a par with the Industrial Revolution. She emphasised the critical role local government has in enabling our communities to make the necessary transitions to the future in a way that protects and enhances their well-being and reduces inequity. She would have very much liked to be here to welcome the findings and the 17 recommendations of the panel's final report. On behalf of Taitoora and local government professionals across Aotearoa, I'd like to thank the panel for the inclusive and extensive engagement it has undertaken since 2021, the boldness it has shown in its final report, and its unwavering commitment to communities and the creation of world-leading local government here in Aotearoa. The challenges Jo mentioned in her speech in 2021 have not gone away. If anything, they've become greater. Last year, Treasury's Wellbeing Report highlighted that our current generation of younger people fare worse than older people, with the real possibility that for the first time in history, the next generation won't be better off. This year, we've seen unprecedented weather events, the declaration of another national state of emergency, and many communities devastated. There's a cost of living crisis, There are big capability gaps within local government, many reforms underway, a funding model that is broken, and many councils are stretched. These challenges won't be solved by yesterday's thinking. Transformation of the system is needed. We must focus on order, on intergenerational wellbeing and equity, like we've never done before. The panel has painted the burning platform for change. When I read the 17 recommendations, particularly alongside the 20 recommendations of the Productivity Commission's report, A Fair Chance for All, there can be no doubt that wellbeing must be the shared purpose of local and central government. The panel's vision, a revitalised local government system centred on a tiriti-based partnership with Māori, strengthened inclusive democracy and intergenerational wellbeing, entrenched as the core purpose of local government. That's Tai Tuata's vision too, and it's great to see the panel's recommendations reflect our recommendations to it. Councils already play a vital role in the building of strong, healthy and prosperous communities. We are placemakers, anchor institutions and conveners of the system. Earlier this month, we celebrated the 2023 Tai Tuata Local Government Excellence Awards, showcasing some of the best work of councils and the efforts and skills of long-standing and emerging leaders in local government. It is no coincidence that the Supreme Award is usually taken out by those councils involved in visionary wellbeing projects that improve equity and partnership with communities. For example, this year's winner, Hutt City Council's housing project, Takai Here Tangata. That's one project, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. Every day we see the power of community-based leadership across local government. Back in the day, that is some 13 years ago, when I first started working in local government, straight out of university, roads, rates and rubbish were a frequent phrase you would often hear. It soon dawned on me that I'd arrived in a sector so broad in its mandate and with responsibilities, so connected to community influence, impact and decision making, what profound opportunities local government provides to make a real difference to the lives of people. These days, I hear the phrase, the council, and persistently remind those people around me, in the words of the Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay, Alex Walker, council is not some faceless organisation with a capital C. Council not only serves community, it is community. It's made up of real people who choose to contribute to a broader purpose than just simply a job. The council I know is not just about roads, rates and rubbish. It's about enabling what matters for the people we serve. I want to share with you a recent note I received from one of our Mayor's Task Force for Jobs staff members at Horowhenua District Council. It reads, "Sometimes the days are long, but the reward is worth it. This week, I brought a young person their first ever properly fitted bra so that their first interview outfit looked on point, and she felt good about herself. Not just a CV or a bag of tools, but the power of confidence." Just sit with that for a moment. That's the council I know. Imagine our communities with wellbeing at the heart of how central and local government engaged, with increased, sustainable and devolved, emphasis on devolved, funding from central government and co-investment in wellbeing outcomes, effective stewardship and a dedicated focus on the central-local government relationship. We know that partnerships, community empowerment and wellbeing will all be improved. The panel's presented a burning platform for change. It's our job to act on it. Local government leaders must rise to the challenge the panel has set us. Local government must lead the reform process with our communities. And while Tai Tuata calls on central government to play its part by working in a collaborative way to move these recommendations forward, we don't have time to wait. More importantly, our communities can't afford for us to wait. The challenges we face in responding to climate change, inequality, social inclusion, They require that transformational change to start now. And we know that the panel's recommendations is not just tinkering around the edges. It is a fundamental reset of the system. Future structures need to be locally designed with communities in partnership with Māori. The process must build trust and confidence in local government. It must meet local needs and aspirations for intergenerational wellbeing and enable local government to meet the challenges of tomorrow. If we want to see a thriving future for our communities we collectively serve, then we must prioritise a transition to a new system. This is not about politics. We need to put the panel's solid platform and roadmap for transition into action. Local government needs to step up and lead the change. It starts with you, it starts with me, it starts with all of us. This is a really challenging but inspiring time for the professional staff of local government. Tai Tuara are midway through a strategic reset to re-energise the organisation and support our members as we go through this change. As part of this reset, we're actively considering how we can contribute to better stewardship, raise the capability of local government staff to drive the change with the urgency and skill that our communities deserve. Order, people thriving in place. It's mission critical for both central and local government because everyone doing well matters. We thank the panel for their great work. And while there will be differences in opinion on particular recommendations, we urge the government and all parties to support the panel's roadmap to enable system change. There is much mahi to do. Let's seize the tono. Ko te pai tawhiti, whaia kia tata. Ko te pai tata, whakamoua kia tina. Seek to bring distant horizons closer. Sustain and maintain those that have arrived. Nō reira e ngā iwi, ngā tangata, nō ngā hau e whā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you, Monique. I now invite the panel to come up on stage and for them to take questions from the audience. If you do have a question, could you, obviously, big voice, and let us know who you are, where you're from, so we can hear both you telling us who you are and your question, and then we'll direct those questions to the panel. So, Alex, I've just said your name, you don't have to say your name now.
My name is Alex Wilson, Mayor of Tamatea Central Hawke's Bay, the southern part of the Hawke's Bay region. I'm inspired actually by my friend and colleague who just spoke, and I think we need to keep people like her in mind as we take this forward, because it's very easy for those of us that have been around a few more years to reflect on what the past looked like, and Monique was 2 in 1989. So when people in the sector talk about what happened in 1989, that's not relevant to the professionals and the future elected members in local government and the future of our communities. So my question to the panel is, you've spent 2 years really deeply in local government and communities and in mana whenua informing your views. Have you got ideas about how we firmly keep the 2-year-olds of today in our minds as we continue to move this forward, which is my nephew, Stuart's grandchildren? Who are the people and the places and the networks that we need to keep front and centre as we move this forward?
Kia ora, Alex. What a good question. And I do, just before I answer it, I have to say I have to admit to tears listening to Monique, and I'm unapologetic about that. We should be moved, and we should have some tears when we think about the capability and the extraordinary nature of local government and what its power is, that, to be honest, has been at times trashed, neglected, underutilised and marginalised. And, you know, what our report hopes to do is to celebrate local government again. But that's not about celebrating councils, councillors and the staff. This is about celebrating the capacity for local government to make change in our communities. So in answer to your question, who should we be thinking about and who are we holding in our minds? Generations to come, my mokos and their children. This is about that resilient future that we're trying to put the structures in place to give effect to. But I'm sure my colleagues will also want to comment. Kia ora. Anyone? Yeah.
I was thinking about the question, and Penny perhaps has stolen a little bit of my thunder, but on our journey, we've met with so many wonderful people, and it's always hard to pick out one particular group, but we had a couple of instances. We had a good time, but not a long time, with the young elected members, and it was so inspirational to have young people, younger than us, who were so in touch with what's happening globally, and they didn't shy away from it. They were courageous and wanting to embrace those challenges and then walk the talk in their communities and show the leadership that's required for mokopuna decision making, intergenerational well-being, always thinking about others. And so we often say walk the talk, but in our particular roles sometimes you get busy being busy, and I was really inspired by particularly the young elected members. We commissioned a little piece of work from a group called Tōkana Taraki, which is a rangatahi trust based down in Christchurch. They were established by Ngāi Tahu. And we had this thought in a small way we would get them to engage with Ngāi Tahu rangatahi. They came back to us and said, we're in a unique position where we can reach out to rangatahi across Aotearoa and get their voices heard. In their context, what are those challenges in the future? So at their insistence, we expanded the scope of that, and we got the richness of the similar issues and concerns, but the different ways that they could embrace solutions, embrace the way that they work in their communities that was relevant to them. So that really expressed to us the diversity of different ways of doing things, being successful in your community and responding to those needs. So I just wanted to share those, but perhaps some of the journey that we've been reflecting on in the last couple of days back to you in terms of we don't have all of the answers. The answers are actually in the community.
Just to add to that, we were quite intentional about intergenerational well-being. So you'll see that throughout the report. And Te Kona Taraki, who Antoine talked about, are hosting Sophie Howe before the LGNZ conference to talk about the experience in Wales of the future, her role as a Future Generations Commissioner. So we're excited about the cross-fertilisation of ideas like that, and those rangatahi inspired us, and they did all sorts of things off the back of that report and encouraging rangatahi to vote and participate in local government, and they're the kinds of young leaders that we see great potential with. And we're also thrilled with the direction of the LGNZ conference and how it has that future orientation and a strong wellbeing focus. So look forward to where that leads as well.
Thank you. Another question? Thank you.
I'm Anita Baker, the Mayor of Porira, and it's probably a similar question that I asked online yesterday. For the first time in the Regional Mayoral Forum, we have 8 mayors and chairs who are open for the amalgamation discussion, the word that you guys haven't used. Obviously, shared services was in there. That's not the answer to start with. We need to have that discussion, and we're all open for it, but none of us can fund it. And you haven't said in there how we're going to help do it and who can help us, because we've got chairs and mayors now who are open for the discussion. In 2 years' time, those people might have moved on. So how are we going to actually make this go now rather than later, and who's going to help pay for it?
Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of the government when it comes to funding, but what we'd anticipated and what we have pushed in the report is to fund transition collaboratively between central and local government. So we are quite explicit that reorganisation process needed two things. It needed obviously political will at a local level, backed up by central government. It needed resources to enable you the capability to be able to do it. The third thing it needed, which I think you've struggled with here, and certainly as someone who lives in the region, I'd seen it firsthand, it's a really hard process to go through under the current legislative settings. So we've also made recommendations to try and remove some of those barriers or impediments and make it simpler if you do have the will at a local level to proceed. So I think the combination of things, Anita, yes, we're advocating for funding, but also, making it simpler and easier from a legislative framework perspective as well.
Perhaps just to add to Brendan, we have identified that it probably can't be all done at once, and we are thinking about some tranches. So rolling out, and particularly getting those who are willing and are ready to have that conversation to start. And there's plenty of preparatory work that would be needed to get that. And the importance of community and hapu iwi engagement can't be stressed too much. But there does need to be political will to withstand the challenge that will come from that. And in a conversation this morning we had with some executives, they stressed the importance of being able to present what's the compelling case, why should communities change, and what's the upside and opportunity. And we need to be really clear and explicit in being able to demonstrate the benefit of the change that's proposed. So not only those things that Brendan talked about, the opportunity for those who are ready, and there will be some regions who are up for the conversation now and would change tomorrow if they could, and hurry up and get on with it. And we know that there will be others where that is going to be probably a far more challenging conversation. They need to possibly take more time, and there may be some lessons to be learned, particularly in the how. And we had a conversation as a panel this morning. It doesn't matter how good the what is if the how's not done well. You've got to do the how really well, and then hopefully you get a good what. So the process is really important, and taking the learnings from the first to the last exercise, I think, will also be something we would be encouraging councils to think about. Kia ora.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Gordon, the Mayor of Waimakariri. Sorry, it's not just the politician show here asking the questions. But look, firstly, can I say thank you to the panel, Jim and team. I think you've done a really excellent job. From the initial draft that came out, I have to say I was a little underwhelmed. But where this has got to, it does show a really good vision, and I think that's the common view that I'm having come out from our sector. Yes, there will be challenging conversations, no two ways about it, but we're up for that. So, and there's got to be change, as you've rightly observed. Interesting point I'd like to know is, in your briefing of political parties, because that's the important part, is that cross-party aspect. What's been their reaction to the briefing? If you were able to share some of those reflections, I'd welcome hearing it.
Yeah, and look, and I've received questions from media today and yesterday about, so how do you feel about your report landing just shy of an election, and is that really helpful or not? We hope it's a helpful contribution to the conversations that are going to come in the coming weeks and months. The response we saw from those that we met with in briefing prior to the report release, I think, like some have raised in the room, there are some things that perhaps aren't totally aligned with, but I think many could see that there were a number of elements that needed to be reflected on. So we're truly looking forward to how parties respond. We do hope that there is the mature conversation that is needed between central government and local government, and as I've said, across the parliament, about how do we need to position local government for success, not just for local government but for communities. And it's that which has to sit at the heart of everything we do. So what is best for communities, and try and put aside our own parochial interests, both whether they're central or local. So I was encouraged by the conversations. Clearly they need time to absorb the report and think about it, but I felt like there is a basis of conversation that can be had. Kia ora.
I guess from a slightly political aspect, Mayor Dan, I just want to echo Stuart Crosby's very wise words that, however this has landed with politicians, the discussions going forward are the critical ones. And I think this is where Local Government New Zealand in particular is perfectly placed to lead some of those conversations with the sector. So, regardless of people's political affiliations, I think there's something in our report for each party to hang on to. Obviously their reactions are muted, there's an election coming up, but my quiet advice is those conversations and the explanation of the opportunity contained within our report for each of those parties is the critical discussion.
We're still within the time frame. Was there a question from the table over here? Yes, please.
Kia ora, Catherine. Maybe I need to turn it on. Kia ora, I'm Catherine Ross from Taitoa. Thank you to the panel. Obviously Monique's spoken for us, but one of the things that we wanted to really understand is what perhaps was one of the more difficult decisions that you had to make in navigating this very complex area, which you've done with absolute aplomb.
All jumping up for that one.
Look, there were lots of very difficult decisions, of course. Just 2 comments. We found that getting to the sharp end of our report coincided with the weather events, and it forced us to re-examine some of our recommendations in terms of are they strong enough and sharp enough, and particularly around community resilience and well-being. So, for me, what that took us to was this issue of really entrenching the well-being in the legislation being a critical decision and inflection point. Now, whether it happens politically is up to the system, but at the very least what it will do is force a discussion and, if you like, flush out political parties' positions on the issue of well-being being at the heart of what local government does. So for me, that was the one that I think was probably the hardest one to get our heads around in terms of the significance of it, because of the constitutional nature that comes with it.
And thanks, Brendan. There's one other that we grappled with through the whole review, and many wanted our report to come out and say, tell us exactly what our job's going to be in the future, which roles we're going to have, and who's going to do what. Is it national, regional, local, and give us the answer. And we, all through our review, really churned on that issue, and we had received some early advice from the sector about this is a way in which all of the roles are functioned, starting with A and ending at Z, and it virtually did that, animal control through to zoology, about what we should, which function should be undertaken nationally, regionally, locally. And we felt the pressure, particularly with other reform agendas, for people to want to know how that hole was going to be filled. We've resisted the temptation of putting out what we think is the answer, because all we can do is get that wrong. The answer is one that needs to be worked through at place. A mature conversation, bespoke and nuanced between central government and local government and communities and hapu iwi Māori, about who is best placed, who has the resources and capability, who has the skills, who has the local knowledge, the connection, the relevance to the community, and who is best placed. And it might be more than just one, but who is best placed to be able to support communities to deliver best value. And so throughout our conversations, we continued to, I wouldn't say spin, but chew on that matter. And the more we chewed, the more certain we were that providing the one-size-fits-all solution was not the right approach. So that was probably one of the other things that, I certainly grappled with through the duration of our review. Kia ora.
And just to follow on from that, I think we also grappled with the localism and having things at scale and with heft to deal with really complex or big, infrastructure challenges and things like that. So we did have a constant sort of wrestle with that. And what we've attempted to do is hold the both and, not to go too binary. So we realise that that's still going to need to be grappled with and worked through, but also it creates a big opportunity for local government to create that form and to figure out how to do it with the principles that we've set out in the report.
This is where we have 5 completely different, most important things.
That's why it took 2 years.
It probably took me 5 seconds to think, what was probably one of the most challenging, and it was what Jim expressed in terms of the roles and functions. And as a little bit of a technocrat, I thought, this is going to be wonderful. We can come up with these really sophisticated, well thought out criteria for what should be national, regional and local and hyperlocal, really, in the community. And the more we delved into it, the more we knew what Jim said, we would always get it wrong. So we resisted the temptation. Perhaps to take a slightly different view, on the panel I was privileged to be looking at international models. And particularly when we caught up with a number of politicians, they had their pet love. Quite a lot of our politicians, for some reason, love Switzerland. Maybe because of the mystique of its role in terms of its neutrality in the world, and all good things come from Switzerland, chocolate and other good things. When we delved into it, not only English-speaking countries in Western Europe, United Kingdom and North America, we also looked at a number of other jurisdictions and non-English-speaking places that were colonised 250 to 350 years ago, and we found that some of the same issues they're grappling with in a post-colonial environment are the same ones we're dealing with: social inequity, haves and have-nots, geographic poverty, all of those social issues, even though they potentially have a lot of the bells and whistles of things that we would like to have in terms of a young country, they already have them, but they're not changing the dial. So that was a real challenge for us, that some of those countries that are several hundred years ahead of us in terms of their grappling with these issues are still dealing with them. So that gave us a little bit of a pause for thought. We're not going to be able to import a really good idea from somewhere else, and I'm including Scandinavian countries in those models. And so we have to have something that is based here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, something that's organic, it's indigenous, and it brings the best of Western democracy, best of our indigenous thoughts and ideas, and brings them together for something quite new and unique. So perhaps that wasn't the greatest challenge, that seemed quite obvious in front of us, but turning that into something quite practical, that people can go, yes, we understand what that is conceptually, and turning it into practice, that's the challenge that both we have had as a panel and you have as people who are working in the sector.
Just saying, women didn't get to vote in Switzerland until 1972, so,
And that was raised, hence the little raru-rarus about the Swiss model. Mine's a real quick one. Mine's about the money. Until almost the last moment, we were nervous and a bit reluctant to put a quantum of money in there, but we felt that we couldn't go out to our colleagues in local government without a fairly substantial comment on the finances. So my own personal delight is that we've got $1 billion in there. So, you know, with a lot of words around it, but the essence is local government needs more funding to do this, and we've put it clearly in there. Thank you.
Look at that. Look at the timing. My risk register is still green. We'll take one more question and then we'll have the closing of the meeting before we go to the food and the sort of informal conversation. And one more question. Somebody? Ronnie? Oops.
This question has come through the webinar, so I thought for our online audience it might be nice to ask a question from them. One concern raised during consultation was the risk that the new Crown Department would only add another layer of complexity and bureaucracy. How would we ensure the new entity would be truly facilitative and not obstructive to a meaningful partnership with central government?
I'll give that to Brendan.
Well, look, it's a great question because it's a very genuine issue that has to be thought through really carefully in terms of the mandate for that organisation, but particularly the leadership, both politically and at an executive level, that organisation is going to require to be a true relationship-based organisation. What, part of the logic for the creation of that entity for people's interest is what we heard really consistently is where really good things were happening between central and local government. Not surprisingly, it was due to good relationships between people on the ground. Someone on the ground and someone in Wellington, they've got a connection, they make things work. But what we also heard is that when people move on from those roles, things fall away. So what we didn't see was enough of the system wiring to try and sustain good relationships. So we decided to be selfish enough and ask for both. Clearly, good relationships is always going to be critical. We wanted that backed by an organisation that did provide some of that institutional wiring into central government, that could act as a broker, a herding the cats, a facilitator, however you want to think of it, with a genuine relationship building focus between central and local government. So, with the right mandate, with the right leadership, with the right political will behind it, it will be successful.
Thanks. Just one little quick added comment to that. We heard earlier in our review, especially, central government, it's too hard to deal with 78. Well, actually, when you're in local government, you're not dealing with one, you deal with 20 or 30 separate. And so the relationship is equally challenging in both directions. So finding ways of bringing the best of both together, and we saw that relational department as being critical in strengthening the relationship, building ties. And as you know, once you actually start to get to know people, albeit that is individual, but when there are greater opportunities for more people from central and local government working together, trust and confidence builds. And it is going to be a bit iterative, but we have seen other examples where that is working well and is a positive step, and we see that as being one of the major changes that are needed and could be a real catalyst and game changer in the way central and local government work together, again, for the benefit of communities. Kia ora.
Last chance. Any more for any more? If not, well, then maybe we'll invite Kara to come up and give us a karakia. Sam?
Nā te mea o te kaupapa, nā te mea o te kaupapa o tēnā hakaro, e poke kē ki tēnā. Engari, e tuara tōna mātou ngā iwi Māori e mihianga ki a koutou. Ko takapau te whāriki o ngā wawaka a ngā mātua tūpuna. Kia haere ki roto i ngā kaunihere, ke ngā kaunihera me ngā kaupapa o te pāremata kia hakatū i ngā ture o tātou katoa. Koe rā tā rātou hia, koe rā tā rātou wawata i te wai haina tia te tiriki o Waitangi. Nō reira tēnei te mihi kia koutou kua ramona a kōrero, o te tino wero nainei nā māwai e tiki te para he rungi te papa, kia haere mai, kia haere ki roto i te whare, kia hakarongo ki tō kōrero, kia hakatinana i tēnā. Nō reira tēnei te mihi kia koutou te whānau katoa i roto i tēnā ākutanga. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou, he tikanga tēnei, e tuara te Māori ki te mihi ki ngā tāngata, aha ko te wā, aha ko te āhuatanga. O reira tēnei te mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou. O rā kau manga e maunga rohonu e, i te maranga e tūmai nei, ka rerenga kupu a ngā tūpuna, Norway ki mai, tuku e hoe, ka piki ake au ki runga i te ti o rā kau manga o mata e, ka mataki take ki te o morunga, te hoe o ngā waka, no rā puhi ngā puhi e te ate awa, tēnei te mihi kia koutou, te whānau, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou.
Tuatahi atu tēnei ki te tukunatanga mihi atu kia koe te rangatira. Ko kōrero ke a koutou mā o te nota, o koutou mā mō tēnei kaupapa. I think it's... Hey, hikama. First it was a phone down the front, now it's a siren in the building. He tohu pia, he tohu pia. I was sitting at the back there just thinking about the importance of this review for us as Māori. And one of the things that I took was the fact that there wasn't a huge group of us here today. And I think you can take that as in two ways. One, we're either really, really busy, which I think there's definitely that. But I think there's a sentiment out there amongst Ngai Māori who have been involved in this process that it has gone well. That the recommendations in the report, in the review, go some way in reflecting the desires and aspirations of Māori, of tangata whenua as it relates to local government and the relationship with local government. And as the rangatira just said, it'll all be in the doing that counts. And I think it's fair to say that we will be watching, but we will also look more favourably at working alongside local government and the sector in pushing these things forward in the right direction. As what has already been said, there's too much to lose, and so we need to move together as one. So with that, I just wanted to acknowledge everyone here today. I also want to pass on the acknowledgements from my Chief Executive, Jo Miller, who can't be here today, but she I felt her spirit in the room, and I know that once she's got rid of well, she's finished on this little journey that she's going on at the moment, and back on board, she'll be pumping to get into this and pushing the sector to make the changes that need to be changed. So with that, I'll close off our session for this afternoon, with a quick karakia. Nā reira, unuhia kia wātea, kia māmata ngākau te tinana te wairua i te ara takatū. Koia rā e rongo, wakairihi aki kirunga, kia wātea, ai rā, ko wātea, rirerire hau pai marere kia tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you to the panel, and if you'd all like to stay and join us for some refreshments, you're most welcome.
Come up with